Welcome to this tutorial. What we have here is called Into the Primitive, or at least what I call Into the Primitive. Primitives are these shapes, and I realize that this screen capture software I'm using today will not display any of these pop-out windows or menu items, so we're just going to have to rough it. You're going to have to pay attention and listen. You basically start with a cube, a camera, and a light. And you manipulate these elements here to create what you saw. I'm going to start with a new file, and I'm going to create a cube, just a simple cube, and then I'm going to make it editable. So I'm going to click this button, and I'm not going to click anything else on the stage. Don't do that. And then I'm going to click the face tool here. So I'm going to arrange these polygons, all of them on this cube. So I'm going to click this one, and you can see what happens. It's got the blue edges, but I'm not going to click anywhere else. But I'm going to right click. So I'm going to right click, and you'll see a very long menu appear. You're going to look for extrude. And if you remember what we did in Wings 3D, we extruded faces. So I'm going to extrude this out a little ways, not too far. And then I'm going to right click again, not right on my object, the cube, but I'm going to right click on the stage somewhere. Then I'm going to go below extrude, and below extrude it says extrude inner. And again, I know you can't see that because of the software I'm using to capture this. And I'm going to make a very small extrude inner. I'm just moving my mouse to the left. So that face right there, it's going to be quite small. And then, so just so you can see what I'm doing, I'm going to open this up to the four portals. I'm going to right click again and go to extrude, and left click and drag those faces inwards. And then I'm going to right click, extrude inner again. Excuse me. And I'm just going to pull to the left, just a little ways. Right click, extrude, and I'm going to extrude those faces back out so I can see them. And hopefully you can see what I'm doing here. Creating a little space in there. Right click, extrude inner. Left mouse move. There we go. Right click, extrude, and bring it back. And I'm going to get closer and closer to the center as I do this. Right click, extrude inner. Left click, and drag, right click, extrude, left click, and then extrude those faces back out. And yes, I realize that my faces are overlapping right here. You can see that. That's okay. That's okay with this assignment. Normally it's no, don't do that. And I'm just repeating these steps. Extrude, extrude inner, right click, extrude inner, drag this down a bit, right click, extrude it back out so I can see it. And I'm just going to continue to do this. Okay? Oops. Extrude inner, extrude. The one thing about this software is you don't want to just randomly click things. Because that'll mess things up for you. So I continue to do extrude and extrude inner, moving my mouse to the left, and then right click extrude, and then I'm going to bring this back in kind of towards right to the center. There we go. So I've got a bunch of weird, almost like hallways inside of hallways inside of hallways. And then I'm going to get my move button again. The next thing I need to do is create a new material to throw on this. So I'll go create new material, double click on the little color ball, and up in color, I'm gonna give this a color. I'm gonna go with like a nice magenta. There we go. Actually, that is magenta right there. 255, 255, and click OK. Then I'm gonna go with transparency because I want this to look like glass. So I need transparency, not that much transparency. And I'm going to give this a different color. I'm going to go maybe with I'll try a yellow. and see what happens. And you can choose whatever two colors you want. That's not bad. With transparency, I'm trying to make this look like glass, so I'm going to add some refraction. You see these zebra stripes here? These lines, they're straight. But if I hit refraction here, and I just bump this up a bit, notice how already those straight lines look curved. And because when light hits glass, it refracts, it bends, I want that to kind of have an effect on my cube as well. And 1.02 is good. You can go to 1.04 if you want, but just a little bit of refraction. And the other thing I'm going to do is reflection. Well, you know what? I'm going to wait for reflection. I'll close this window, throw this right on my cube. Oops. I'm going to throw this over here instead, right on my cube. There we go. And now when I render it out, that's what I get. The next thing I need to do is get a light. There we go. So now you can see the two colors in there a little bit better. And I'm also going to bump up the light. I'm going to try 200%. Because with this assignment, it tends to get dark with all the layers of glass. So I'm going to bump up that light. I can adjust it later, of course. And finally, the last thing I'm going to do is click here under camera. And I'm going to go with what's called a target camera. Because the target camera comes in two parts. The camera, which you can see right here, and we'll sit inside that camera in a second, and a target. The target is right here. So if I move the target, I don't know if you can see how the camera is following that target. And I'm going to call this Wallace cam. There we go, the Wallace cam. And that's the W cam target right there, just so you see that. Right now I'm in the default camera view, and under cameras, this is where these other cameras come in view. Top, front, right, they're right here. But you can select a camera to use for this window. So there's the default camera, but there's my Wallace cam. Notice how Wallace cam and Wallace cam. So I know it, gee, it's just realized you can't see this. Under cameras, go to use camera, and then find your camera, not the default camera, but this one. It modifies a little bit. You just see it slide a little bit. But if I move the camera now, if I move out here and I grab the camera, you can see it's always looking right in the center, right where that target is. And if I select the target and move the target, it's always going to look at that target. Okay? We'll get to that in a bit. So I've got my camera, my light, and my cube. The camera has a focal length. So in photography, there are different focal lengths. If this was a 300 millimeter lens, it would be quite a zoom lens. You would see it would magnify your image quite a bit. If you have a lower number, you have what's called a wide angle lens. This is fairly wide. If I went to 28, clicked out, I would get a wider view. So my field of view is now 65 degrees. I'm going to change this all the way down to 5. Because when I get to 5, I get 149 degrees of my field of view. So it's a super wide angle lens. And you can see that it looks like my cube has moved away, but it really hasn't. My camera is still in the exact same location. I'm also going to change the sensor size to 55, which is going to even further this distortion. And all I'm going to do is now I'm going to bring my camera into the primitive. Yes, just like that. I'm going to bring it right inside of my cube. Like so. There we go. And let's see what it looks like. Not too bad. It looks okay. Not too bad. One thing I am going to do, though, is I'm going to add what's called a hypernerb. It's the first one here. It looks like this icon right here. It's got the lines and the vertices, and then it's got a ball in the middle of it. So what that means really is that it's taken this cube and it's smoothed it. So in Wings 3D, we did a Shift Tab to smooth things out. In this program, use a HyperNurb. So I'm going to create a HyperNurb, and I'm just going to drag my HyperNurb down here, and I'm going to put my cube inside the HyperNurb. And it's going to smooth it out. And hopefully you can see what happened to my cube here. It really smoothed it out. So I'm going to click the Render Preview button, and that's what it looks like now. I'm actually going to move the camera in even a little bit closer. There we go. Let's see what this looks like. Not too bad. Not too bad. One thing I will do is that I'm going to bump these numbers up a little bit just to smooth out my shapes, my lines. Okay. And the other thing I'm going to do now is I'm going to take my light and I'm going to add a shadow. Now I'm adding things, and as I add things, it's going to take longer to render. There we go. So see what happens when I do that? Adds a little more information. And I'm also going to maybe move my target a bit. And what I'm doing now is just modifying my frame to see what I can find. That's not too bad. Kind of cool. Kind of cool. So that's what I have. The other thing that I can do is go in here, and I'm going to double click on my material, and I'm going to go to reflection. I'm going to check off reflection, and I'm going to bump this reflection down a little bit, maybe around 50. I'm going to close this, and I'll render preview again. And once I added that for reflection, it's going to take much longer. So when I added the shadow, it took longer to render. When I add a reflection or anything else to the material, it's going to take longer to render. So as you can see, this looks quite different than the one I did here with this one. And I'm not going to spend time rendering it because that's going to take too long. But you can see that whatever you do to this piece of glass here, it's going to change the look. So you want to play around with it. And finally, the last thing I'm going to do is this right here. These are distortion tools. And one thing I can do is, for example, do something like shatter. And when I click on shatter, it's going to shatter my cube, but I have to put it inside my cube. So it's not going to be a parent. It's going to be a child of the cube. And down here I've got strength. And if I increase the shatter, you can see what happens in my portal view over here. So if I bring it back down to 0 and then do that, what's happening, can you see on the right portal view there? It just kind of collapses it from top down. So this view, it just goes and it collapses it. So you can mess around with these and see what happens. So it's basically busting apart all of my faces so that I get this different look. There we go. Not too bad, looking pretty. And what else can I do? If I pull my cube out of that HyperNurb, do a render again, it's going to look a little bit different. And it's going to be a little more sharper. There we go. So if you want to use the HyperNurbs, great. If you don't want to use the HyperNurbs, that's fine as well. But what you want to do is use a cube, a light, and a camera. The cube, you're going to do that extrude inner, back and forth and back and forth. You create a cube, you click Make Editable, you click the Polygon Face tool, and then you don't click on your cube at all. Do not touch the cube. You simply right-click, go to Extrude, and start from there. And once you've got your cube, then you make your material. I would I would simply just go in and go with color and then transparency. Add a color to your transparency and bump it down a bit. And then drag and drop right onto your cube. After that, add a light and see what it looks like then. So click the render preview button. And then after that, get your target camera, which is right here. Click and hold. Make sure it's not the regular camera, but a target camera. That way you can make adjustments. Oops, not the light, but the camera target. You can make adjustments to where your camera is looking. And then change these numbers right here, the focal length and sensor size from 5 and 55. And then drag that camera right inside your cube, all the way inside, and then do a render preview and see what happens, making sure that you click your perspective view to do that. So click perspective view, click your render view, and see what you get. And after you get something, then maybe throw it into a HyperNerve, and then maybe add one of these distortion elements, and then go in and add a reflection, because doing all these things is going to get you a really cool looking image. Okay, so give that a shot. Have fun with it.